China's economic growth is expected to cool in 2017 as it attempts to tackle asset price bubbles, most evident in the property market. There's also issues of a sharp fall in the country's currency, astronomical debt, and constant accusations that the government cooks the books. Well, for more insight into China and the threat that it poses to the stability of the global economy, I've got David Kuo from Motley Fool right here. David, hello to you. Thank you for coming into the studio.
I know, it's a long trip from Singapore, isn't it?
It is.
Yes?
He's come especially for the interview, so we do appreciate it. If only. Let's talk about some of the themes that I just reeled off then. But the first one I want to do is growth, because there's been a few think tanks, if you like, saying that it's not going to be as high, but then we hear that all the time. But 6.7% isn't half bad, but actually it's probably the worst in about 25 years.
Well, that's right. And, you know, China will have to accept the fact that it's not going to be growing in the double digits anymore. It's going to be growing at around sort of between 6 and 7%. That should be happy. People should be happy with that. I mean, people outside of China, but are the people in China happy with between 6 and 7%? I think it is a worry for them, because ultimately they've been so used to such a high octane growth, all of a sudden to find that they're running on unleaded petrol just isn't really that great for them.
You're obviously close to the region. 6.7%, 6%, 7%, whatever. Are these figures realistic? Are they real?
That is a great question. That is
we don't know, do we?
That is a great question. Well, what I tend to do, and I think what a lot of other people tend to do also, is to have a look at what companies are saying they're doing in China. I tend to put more reliance on companies like McDonald's or Yum Brands that operates Kentucky Fried in China. I want to know what they tell me about what is going on in China rather than what the Chinese official figures say. I mean, what I find really surprising with China is that at the beginning of the year, somebody comes out and says, tell you what, the growth of this year will be between, say, 5.5% and 6%. And lo and behold, by the end of the year, it'll be somewhere between 5.5% and 6%. I've never known a country to be able to predict with such accuracy what the growth is going to be. And yet, in the case of China, it always comes out to be the figures that they want in the very beginning.
Perfect.
So, well, it would be perfect, but the thing is, it does make you a little bit suspicious about what is going on.
It really does. Let's talk about Donald Trump, because obviously it's been a huge theme of 2016. Him almost attacking China, them stealing jobs away, manipulating the currency. What's going to happen with China and Mr. Trump then? Because they need each other.
Well, they do need each other, and I think, you know, President-elect Trump will come to the realization that he needs China as much as China needs the US. What Donald Trump is very good at doing is to set a negotiating stance, and so that's exactly what he's doing. He's saying that this is what I say, but ultimately they will, both sides, I think, will come to some kind of compromise, and they will accept the fact that in order for the two largest economies in the world to move forward, they will have to, you know, make sacrifices. Both sides will have to make sacrifices. And so I'm not too worried about, you know, all the rhetoric that goes on. There is a lot of saber rattling going on, not only from Donald Trump, but certainly from the Chinese side as well. I mean, to go around and take somebody's sea drone, you know, is almost a sign that we are here and we're not going to simply just roll over and let you say whatever you do. If you do something in our region, then we will punish you for it. And so I hope all of this starts to simmer down a little rather than to actually bubble over, because if it bubbles over, then a lot of people in Southeast Asia will suffer.
You mentioned bubbles.
Yes.
So let's go on from there and talk about this property bubble that seems to be one of the biggest risks.
Such a good segue.
Brilliant, isn't it? That's what I'm here for, you know, it's talent that. So property bubble, I mean, it's scary really, because it's huge.
But what choice does China have? I mean, China knows that there are certain sectors that are growing well. Now, if it's going to achieve that, say, 6.5 or 6.7% growth, it's got to accept the fact that those bubbles are going to contribute to the economic growth. Now, if you know that housing is growing, and that is going to be a starting point for growth, because if you think about it, I mean, if people start buying houses, after they move into the house, they're going to start needing furniture, they're going to need TV sets, they're going to need all sorts of things. So that is what fuels consumer demand, and that is what fuels growth in China. So it has to accept the fact that, yes, there is going to be a bubble, but maybe that is a price worth paying.
But what happens if it bursts? You don't seem that concerned, or you don't think it will?
Well, you know, I think there is a likelihood that it could burst, but ultimately China is in control of its own monetary policy, its own currency. I mean, have you ever tried buying Chinese yuan outside of China? I mean, I remember once trying to buy the Chinese yuan, and they said, well, there's no supply at the moment. So China controls its own currency. China controls its own destiny. So there are lots of things that we look at from an economic point of view, and we say, oh, there are bubbles there, but China knows how to solve those bubbles.
China also knows how to control its currency, as you say,
Yeah.
but the problem with that is it's been sliding, and quite exceptionally now it's at an 8-year low.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing?
Well, the thing is, I mean, China also knows that, you know, there are 4 levers that it can pull in order to get that economic growth. There is consumer demand, but there is also net exports. In other words, China needs to export its goods. So what better way to export than to cut the value of your own currency? So Donald Trump has a point, you know, when he says that China is manipulating its currency. If you can, why don't you do it? And some people might say Britain is manipulating its currency at the moment.
I don't think so.
Well, some people might say that, you know, how is Britain going to export its goods if the currency doesn't actually fall? And so I'm not saying that anybody is right or anybody is wrong in doing these sort of things. These things happen. And so I think there are lots of countries around the world that would like a lower currency. And China has one at the moment, so therefore it's able to export. And if it can export, then it will be able to achieve its final target of, say, 6.7%.
Well, Japan would, even though it's going Japan's way, actually, at the moment. Quickly, just want to talk about the debt situation. Because when you look at the numbers, again, we don't really know the real numbers, but if you look at some of the predictions, actually, this could make the whole global economy tumble.
And it's not just China. I mean, there is a debt problem in the US, there is a debt problem in the European Union. I think there is a debt problem in many countries around the world. And this debt has been fueled by easy money. Stimulus, and has been fueled by quantitative easing. I mean, I remember once just working on the back of an envelope, you know, how much quantitative easing has pumped into the global economy. We're talking about somewhere in the region of 15 trillion US dollars.
That's mind-boggling.
It is about the size of the Chinese economy. So ultimately, what the central bankers around the world have done is to create another country out there with an enormous amount of money, and that money has to be paid by somebody. That money has to be repaid by somebody. And guess who's going to be repaying it, Katie?
You and I.
Yeah, well, yes. First of all, it's us, then it's our children, then it's our grandchildren. So we've left them this legacy, and it's called quantitative easing.
Just to conclude, David, before we let you go, China 2017. So you think it's just going to continue growing at a reasonably healthy rate, and there's going to be no bubbles bursting just yet, right?
It has no choice, Katie. It has to actually sort of carry on growing, because otherwise there will be probably social unrest in China, and we don't want that. Because can you imagine what it'd be like if there was a billion people up in arms about the slow growth and not enjoying the prosperity they were promised? We don't want to go down that road at all.
It's a horrible, horrible thought. All right, David Crow, thank you very much indeed. We'll leave it there. That's David Crow there from Motley Fool talking to us today about China in 2017.